Okay, I hope like now you are able to hear me, see me, and view the slide. All the three are okay.
Yes, sir.
Please do let me know if at all any challenges. Yeah. Now, why this is the most important is because Supreme Court is a self-correcting court, as someone has pointed out, and it can change its verdict only by a higher judge bench. Higher judge bench. Judge bench. Bench means a group of judges coming together to give the verdict. Now, if a five judge bench has ruled, only a seven judge bench can change its verdict. If a seven judge bench has given a ruling, only a nine judge bench can give the verdict. Now, Keshwanand Bharati case, the most important thing is it is the highest judge bench which has so far constituted in India. That is, a 13 judge bench gave its verdict. And even this 13 judge bench, six judges are disagreeing and only seven judges were in agreement. That is, with a slightest margin, it has given this verdict. Now, why it is important? Because from 1950 to 1973, there was a power struggle between parliament and constitution and judiciary. Now, we know that in constitution we have three organs. One is legislature, one is executive, and one is judiciary. Now, this is what the power struggle between parliament and judiciary. Now, what happened was in Shankari Prasad case, the question was, can Parliament amend any part of the Constitution? Here, Supreme Court said, yes, it can amend. Okay. Whereas Sajjan Singh case also, it said, yes, it can amend. But in Golaknath case, Supreme Court said, no, Parliament cannot amend. Now, Parliament did not like it. Now, what Parliament has done, it added Article 13, Clause 4 through 24th Amendment Act in 1971. It means the Parliament wanted to ascertain that we can amend any part of the Constitution. We can amend any part of the Constitution. Now, Parliament again, now here when the Parliament tried to assert its power, Supreme Court reacted with Keshwanand Bharti case. Here it said that Parliament can amend any part of the Constitution with a condition. That means with a condition, that condition is basic structure doctrine. Basic structure doctrine. That means all amending powers of the Parliament were taken over by Supreme Court. So it is a conditional yes, but some scholars call this as a no. So in short, judiciary has taken over all the powers from Parliament through this Keshwanand Bharti case. Now, why this is important politically? Because we cannot only see that why Supreme Court is changing, saying yes, saying no, saying yes with a condition. Now, to understand this one, you have to understand the political scenario which is unfolding in the country after independence. Now, what happened after independence was, if you see the members of the first parliament, 1950, okay, there were people like Maulana Azad or Jawaharlal Nehru or Shama Prasad Mukherjee. All these are like the towering leaders of those times who has taken part in our freedom struggle. And when they have made the constitution, they ensured that all the people would get their rights, okay, fundamental rights. Now, over time in 1960s and 1970s, what happened yesterday we were discussing, the power struggle has started within Congress. Congress became like a, earlier it was a very democratic party. Congress became like one person led, that is Indira Gandhi led. Congress till Lal Bahadur Shastri was very democratic, but after the death of Lal Bahadur Shastri, Congress became a very, you can say, a closed party. There were no other voices in the Congress. Now, many people in the country or across the world were concerned that can India remain as a democratic country? Because across the neighborhood, like take the examples of Pakistan or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or Myanmar or Maldives, almost all the countries in our neighborhood are turning into dictatorships. Now, there was a concern in India that India would also turn into dictatorship. Now, that is where we can see the constitutional, this one are changing. So if you see 42nd Amendment Act, 25th Amendment Act, 24th Amendment Acts, all these are trying to ascertain that Parliament is powerful. Now, if you see the world history, you will realize that the way Hitler has come to power, the way Mussolini has come to power, all they have used democratic institutions to come to power, and they crushed the very democratic institutions. Okay, that means if you see the profile of Hitler, he was a small soldier in German army. Now, with the help of democracy only, he could become the president of Germany. But after becoming the president, he has killed all the institutions through which he came up. Okay, now this is the irony of history. Now, in the same way, there were concerns that in India, if a political party could come, imagine if a political party would come and it amends the constitution. It says democracy is not there in India. It says dictatorship is the feature of Indian constitution. It can happen. Okay, this same thing has happened in other countries. Now that is why Supreme Court has said that democracy is a basic structure of Indian constitution. You cannot alter democracy. Secularism is a basic structure of Indian constitution. You cannot alter secularism. Maybe imagine a right-wing political party comes to power with a electoral mandate and says that India is now a Hindu Rashtra. It cannot be done because Supreme Court said secularism is a basic structure of Indian constitution. Now that is why Supreme Court kept on adding these things in basic structure. What is basic structure? Maybe if you see Lakshmikant, there is a separate chapter on basic structure. Okay, I suggest, like I insist, like you read about that. But if you want, I'll give you some points about Keshwanand Bharati case. I'll put it in the chat. Maybe if you want, you can go through them. Again, we cannot discuss in detail, but this is like a very important thing. There is a appreciation for Keshwanand Bharati case. If you want, you can make a note of the appreciation of Keshwanand Bharati case. Okay, first one. Okay, Keshwanand Bharati case said we cannot demolish the building, but you can just do some modification. Think of constitution as like a building, as a heritage building. You cannot destruct the building and construct a new one. You can do some minor modification. Alteration is allowed, but complete demolition of the structure is not allowed. That is what we call it as basic structure doctrine. Now, judiciary tried to distinguish between the parliament and constituent assembly. That is, constituent assembly gave the constitution. Okay, does not mean parliament can change anything in the constitution. Okay, that some features are different. Some features are inherent. You cannot change these features at any cost. Even if the parliament is elected by the people, you cannot change at any cost. Now, the constitution makers gave the powers to judiciary, that judicial review. Now, this judicial review became like judicial activism. Okay, that is, Supreme Court became like an activist. It tried to interpret Article 13 Clause 2 in a way that it gives itself tremendous power. And as I told, politics is all about power. It is a power struggle between judiciary and judiciary and legislature. Okay, so it tried to define what is amending the constitution and what is rewriting the constitution. This is allowed in India. This is not allowed in India. Okay, that is why Keshwanand Bharati case is very important, because it tried to do this. Now, why it is criticized? Keshwanand Bharati case criticized. In fact, the 6 judges, as I told, the 6 judges themselves wrote against the Keshwanand Bharati case. What they wrote? This is what we call it as co-governance. Because what is co-governance means? See, in a democracy, who would rule the country? We are calling democracy. Citizens should rule. Now, citizens, on their behalf, they elected the parliamentarians. If parliament does not have the power, then who will have the power? Okay, because if you are questioning the wisdom of parliament, it means indirectly you are questioning the wisdom of the citizens of country. Okay, now let people want a democratic country. Let people want a dictatorship country. Let people want for Hindu Rashtra. Let it be there. Why the court should be there? It is people's mandate. Okay. Now this is this one, and this is what we call it as co-governance. Co-governance means on one side legislature is ruling, on one side judiciary is also ruling. On one side judiciary is also ruling. And judiciary is the least representative and least accountable organ of the government. That means in parliament or in executive, we have the measures like RTI, we have the measures like PIL. We know what is going on through Lok Sabha channel, Rajya Sabha channel. But what happens in judiciary, how the appointments are made, everything is like a black box. You do not know what is happening in judiciary. In fact, within judiciary itself, there are a lot of problems. Now, instead of solving those problems, judiciary is trying to encroach upon the rights of legislature and executive. Okay, you know, if you go to a high court, it will take 10 years, 20 years. Okay, this is a you can say the major challenge in judiciary. Instead of reforming itself, judiciary is trying to reform the other organs of government. So charity begins at home. If you want to clean up the system, first start with your system. Now in judiciary itself, there are multiple challenges. Instead of reforming itself, it is trying to reform the legislature and executive. This is not fair. Okay, this is what the criticism for Keshwanand Bharti case. Now in short, the Keshwanand Bharti case is appreciated as well as criticized. That is where it is very open for debate. Okay, maybe in your polity you will learn more about this, but I insist like you take a screenshot of this particular slide and try to understand each and every aspect of this. Maybe in your polity class you'll learn more about these articles, but I wanted to keep it simple with minimum number of articles. But to sum up, it is a very complex thing, open for debate, open for interpretation. And if you are a law student, you will realize that there is one complete subject only for Keshwanand Bharti case. Okay, till today the students are reading what does actually the Keshwanand Bharti case is there. Not only the Indians who will read about Keshwanand Bharti case, but law students across the world, they read about Keshwanand Bharti case in detail. Now, why it is of interest for many students is because it is many scholars, researchers. It is because at one stroke, the Supreme Court has taken over all the powers of the Parliament. That is what basic structure doctrine. Okay, this is the reason why it is the most important. Any questions? I hope we spent more than enough time. Do let me know if you have still questions. Okay, otherwise I'll take it as no. We'll proceed with our topic of the discussion today. That is the tribal integration, the tribal policy in India after independence. Okay, so do stop me if you have any questions, or it's a bit clear, or at least it gave you a direction to prepare. Go through Lakshmikant, go through the topics, judicial review, basic structure. Okay, so you'll get fundamental rights article 13, then you'll get some idea about what is this one. And whenever you are reading your polity, do not read in conjunction here. Try to understand with respect to the political scenario in the country. Now, what was the political scenario in 1950s, 1960s? Those people who went into parliament, they were highly regarded. That means people had trust in them. Okay, people had trust in the parliamentarians of 1950s and 1960s. But over time, what happened is there was a trust deficit. That means those people who went into the parliament, they went to make money or to get power. Now, this is where the people's trust in the parliamentarians was eroding. Okay, that is the reason Supreme Court also had to take up this one. That is, simply put, people trust the judges, then they trust babus and netas. There are babus, they are netas. So people's trust is much more with judiciary. That is why Keshwanand Bharti case was, you can say, successful. Just 1 minute. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, so any questions till now? Or we'll move on. Okay,
No,
yeah.
sir.
So we'll move on to the next one. So just take a screenshot of this and it will be very much helpful when you read with your polity. Okay, now, as I told, like in this particular subject, so unlike your ancient or medieval or modern history, where you have to completely depend upon me, but in this particular paper, your other faculty would help you out. Your polity faculty would help you out. Your internal security faculty or your economy faculty would be helping you out. Okay, now coming back to the discussion of today, that is the tribal integration into India. Now, what are the challenges in the tribal integration? Okay, where it went wrong, where it went in the right direction, what exactly is the fate of the tribals in India? Now all this we have to understand. Okay, what is the Naxalism, what is the need, or what is the challenges of Naxalism? So all this we have to understand with respect to the political history of the country. Now maybe I gave you one slide. Okay, maybe this is better. Yeah. Okay, now what exactly happened and what is this left-wing extremism? We'll have a complete discussion. Now, maybe when you are preparing for the tribal, the issues of tribals. So, what is it? Is make a list of when you are preparing for tribal integration or tribal issues. Make a list of the tribal revolts in India pre-independence. Pre-independence. Make a list of all tribal issues in India pre-independence. Now, I hope like we covered in detail when we are discussing about modern Indian history. Otherwise, in your modern Indian history notes, I gave you the guideline to prepare for tribal revolts. So there we have drawn a flow chart, the frontier issues and the non-frontier issues. Okay, and the uprising, the tribal uprisings. There are multiple popular uprisings in India, and one of the things is the tribal issues. Could you recollect like the tribal uprising in the east, like the Rangpur or Code Rebellion, Santal Rebellion, the Munda Rebellion, and in the south, the Rampa Rebellion. So all these are tribal uprisings which were happening. Now, why exactly so many tribal uprisings are happening? Okay, in during the colonial era, during the British Raj, why so many tribal uprisings are going on? Now, I gave you some reasons why all these rebellions are happening. Could you recollect? So, I think in your modern history notes, we made a flow chart like this. Okay, if you could recollect like tribal uprisings, what are the causes? So quickly, we'll sum up. Like the tribals were dependent on shifting agriculture, like hunting, fishing, use of forest produce, and because of influx of non-tribals, okay, tribals were reduced to agricultural laborers. And also during the British, the money lenders were introduced. Okay, these money lenders started exploiting the tribals, and finally in 1864 the forest department was set up, and without any mercy these forests were chopped off for timber or for various natural resources. And you know that the Britishers had a very favorite hobby, that is going for hunting. Okay, and they go for hunting, they kill the wild animals which are very sacred for many tribals. Now, because of all these reasons, like Government Forest Act 1865 or Indian Forest Act 1878 established complete government monopoly over the forest lands, and those people who were there for millions of years, they were treated as, you can say, outsiders, and they were forcibly evicted. And also the advent of Christian missionaries led to social upheaval. Now, all these are the reasons why so many rebellions happened. I just gave some rebellions. Now, if you see in my notes, I gave you all the rebellions which are there, tribal rebellions at one place. So, I just like go through the tribal rebellions before independence. Okay, so make a list of all tribal rebellions before independence and the common causes and specific causes. See, you cannot write common causes everywhere. Okay, now the common causes like their livelihoods are gone, their forests were taken, their land resources, their water bodies were taken, and they had no other livelihood options but to become like agricultural laborers, and they were exploited during the colonial times. Now, in short, the tribals have that attitude of, so who are, first of all, who are tribals? Can anyone tell me who are tribals? General understanding.
Those who live in forest areas.
Any other definition? Any other definition? Okay. See, not only forest, they can live in hilly terrains. Okay. They may live in islands. Okay. So they can live in general, those people who live in relative isolation. If you want, you can write down those people who live in relative isolation to that of the mainstream society, to that of the mainstream society, and their lives are very much intertwined with the nature, very much intertwined with the nature. Again, the word relative is very important. Okay, not complete isolation. Again, it's not complete isolation, relatively isolated. That means there are contacts with the mainstream cultures but not complete integration. Okay, because when we think of tribals, we always think of like those living in forest, like the primitives. Okay, there is one section, definitely there are one section, PVTG. If you want, you can make a note. Particularly vulnerable tribal groups. PVTG, particularly vulnerable tribal groups. That means they had very limited human contacts. They were living in, you can say, large scale isolation. They are still living like early man, and they are of interest for anthropologists or archaeologists to know about how humans lived in prehistoric times. Okay, the way they have dealt with climate changes, the way they have dealt with diseases. Maybe there was a very interesting case, there were some tribal groups in Andaman Nicobar Islands, like Sentinelese or Nicobaris, okay, or Jarwa. So all these are the tribals in the Andaman Nicobar regions. Now, what happened was when tsunami was happening, right? So when tsunami was happening, we were completely unaware. It was like a shock. But what they observed is these tribal groups had some kind of forecast, and they could forecast that tsunami is coming, and they were completely prepared for the tsunami. They went to the upper regions. Now, how they came to know, no one knows. Now, that means we cannot say they do not have any technology or they do not have any culture, but they have very good closeness with the nature. And because of this one, they were able to tackle, okay, these things. But over time, what happened was there was human interactions. In fact, there was one classic case, where there were human safaris which were there. You know, safari. Okay, you know, heard of safari? When you go to zoo, you will be in, yeah, we will
Yes,
be in
sir.
a small van. Okay, you will be taking around all the wild animals. Now, human safari is like, instead of wild animals, you will see the tribals living in their spaces. Now, many tourist operators in Andaman Nicobar, they used to take the tourists used to take the photographs. Okay, someone used to throw the food to them just like they throw at the wild animals. Okay, so this all shows the way in human way they are being treated. And finally, Supreme Court had to interfere and said that human safaris are banned. Now, when we talk about tribals, we only think of complete isolation, but not every tribal are of complete isolation. As I told, it is relative isolation, because there are some groups, definitely there are some groups in Andaman Nicobar Islands or some portions in Northeast which are having very less contacts with humans, but most of the tribals, at least in Indian mainland, okay, they were having good relations with the mainstream cultures, but their interaction is limited. Now, what happened was, as I told, historically they were the ones who were directly dealing with the nature. So their attitude was something, they have developed that attitude of we have to fight. Then only we will be able to solve our problems. Now this has like it has become like part of their culture. That is why during the colonial time there was influx of outsiders. During the British Raj, during the colonial times, there was influx of outsiders. Now many of the outsiders were, you can say, farmers or moneylenders or other people who were started exploiting them. That means they came into the tribal localities, taken over their land, taken over their forest, taken over their water bodies. And these people who were living in the forests for thousands of years, they became like thieves in their own homes. I hope you got the point. Definitely, there were some outsiders who helped them in giving them medicine, in giving them education, in giving them other privileges. Okay, but at the same time, most of the outsiders were those who came to exploit them. So naturally, okay, it is not only the Britishers who exploited, but also Indians. Okay, when we say non-tribals, there was movement of non-tribals into the forest areas, and that is why the, you can say, the attitude of tribals became like this. They were very, you can say, hesitant or suspicious of the outsiders. Whenever they see outsiders, they felt like they are here to exploit us, they are here to take away something from us. Now this is the attitude which the tribals developed during the colonial era. I hope you got the understanding of pre-independence, how their lives were changed. Any questions till now? Okay, then what happened during post independence? What happened during post independence. Now, whenever we talk about freedom struggle, the way it has occurred, it is the freedom struggle is not focused in the, you can say, the central parts of India or northeastern India as much as it is in the peripheries of India. Like as I told, like from non-cooperation, from Swadeshi movement to Quit India movement, all major freedom struggles are in cities, are in coastal areas, or in those areas which are having a better access to infrastructure. Okay, many of the regions like the central part of India were completely immune to the freedom struggle. There were here and there were few examples, okay, the tribal struggles which were there, but they are not necessarily for freedom. They are necessarily for their own autonomy, not necessarily for the freedom struggle. But they have a common enemy, that is the common enemy, that is the British Empire. But however, what happened was their participation in freedom struggle was also very limited. Okay, no doubt they have contributed, but at the same time, their participation or their integration into the freedom struggle was very much limited. So that is why when India became independent, not everyone were in a position to connect with the idea of India. Okay, definitely the people who fought or who have participated in the freedom struggle had lot of hopes on the new India, the new independent India, but not everyone in the country. That is why, though Indian Constitution came into force in 1950, okay, many people were completely unaware here. In fact, there was one documentary where they were showing in 1960s or 1970s, one journalist would go to a tribal village in, I think, Madhya Pradesh, then Madhya Pradesh, somewhere in Madhya Pradesh, in very interior tribal village. Okay, they have not even seen a India flag. They did not even know how the India flag would look like, because no, as I told, in Northeast, no Gandhian with a Gandhi cap went to Northeast. Okay, in the same way, they were not completely aware of what is India, what is this flag, or what are the symbols for which we have fought. They were completely unaware of these issues. Now, this is not true for everything, but in general, this was a problem. Now, further, what happened was the constitution makers were aware that the British were exploiting these winds. Now, when, okay, if you want, you can write few points, the effects of colonialism on tribal, effects of colonialism. Okay, 4 points. Okay, again, you have to be very precise when you're writing your answers. 4 points. One is isolation. Isolation. First one is isolation. Second one is debt trap. That is, money lenders started going into this. They started giving money. Okay, once they started accepting money, they were in debt trap. They were exploited. They became like bonded laborers. Okay, to Mahajans or Jamindars, they became like bonded agricultural workers. Okay, first is isolation. Isolation. There was relative isolation. Then debt traps. Then the advent of Christian missionaries. They were forcibly converted, saying them that you are barbarians, you do not have any culture, you have to, there is no other god other than the Jesus Christ, and this was imposed on their cultures. Okay, forcefully, many times forcefully. So these missionaries destroyed their art, their practices, their dances, their handicraft industry. Everything was destroyed, and in fact, their whole culture was destroyed, and that too forcefully. And last one is their relation with forests. And British had no mercy about this one. So the land, timber, whatever, wherever they felt there are resources, either natural resources, without any mercy they used to take it, because most of the times the tribals dependent on forest for food, for their fuel, for their cattle field, and for their raw material for the handicrafts. Now this destruction of forest led to the destruction of their livelihoods, and many of the tribals became homeless or uh, jobless. And because of this reason, we can see a lot of tribal revolts happening in India in pre-independent India. I hope you can sum up the policy of British during the this one. So when you're writing the answers, you have to write all the four things. One is isolation, one is debt trap, one is missionaries, one is forests. Any questions till now? Otherwise, we'll go to the post-independent history. Now, coming to post-independent history. Okay, now one challenge the constitution makers found is how to integrate these tribals into the mainstream. First of all, whether to integrate or not. Okay, you can write down the approach of tribal integration. The approach of tribal integration was the approach of tribal integration was having two challenges. Was having two challenges. Okay, first one, to leave them completely, to leave the tribal people alone, to leave the tribal people alone, and let them live the way they were living already. Okay, let them live the way they were living already. The second notion is assimilate them completely. Assimilate. Okay, this word is very important. Assimilate, that is integrate them into India, assimilate them completely, and and help them in upliftment. Help them in upliftment. You can put this upliftment in quotation. Now let them leave them completely as they were. Okay, let them choose. Okay, let them choose the way they wanted to live and leave them completely. The other choice Indian government had to give them, you can say, jobs, to give them education, to give them medicine, to give them hospitals, and assimilate them into the nearby cultures as quickly as possible. Now this is also having a problem. This is also having a problem. Now what is the problem with this, to leave them completely? The problem is it is not desirable or appropriate to keep them isolated because they are already external influences. Okay, now they are already having external influences. This possibility is completely ruled out. At the same time, this possibility was also having the challenges, because to quickly integrate them into the nearby cultures, because this would lead to loss of their identities, or lot of their cultural identities, social and cultural identities, and many of the virtues they possessed would be completely spoiled. Now this is also not good. This is also not good. Now what is that India wanted is some kind of middle path. Now this is what the Jawaharlal Nehru's policy for tribal integration in India. Now it is not completely this, not completely this, partly this and partly this. So you can get a complete full-fledged question. What was the policy of post-independent India for tribals? A complete question out of this. Write down few points. Okay, write down few points. Jawaharlal Nehru's policy of tribal integration had 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 to walk a tightrope walk. Had to walk a tightrope walk. Okay, you know the tightrope walk. You have to walk very carefully. If you walk on this side or this side, you will fall off. Okay, if you walk on this side or this side, there will be danger. That is, to leave them completely is a problem. To forcefully assimilate them into the cultures is also a problem. Okay, now the tightrope walk is to partially this. You can write down tightrope walk with these two parameters. With these two parameters. First one, the tribals to have the tribal areas to be developed. First one, the tribal areas to be developed on various indices on various indices such as literacy, health, human development, etc. Literacy, health, literacy, comma health, comma human development, etc. Okay, so first there should be development. Second one, second one, but the progress should be in their own way. The progress should be in their own way. Should be in their own way. That means it should not be imposed on the top. It should not be imposed from the top. Maybe for example, if you bring a tribal person who was living in forests and force him in sitting in the coaching center from morning to evening, okay, he might not like that because he did not have that, you can say, capability to understand or did not have the capability to appreciate. So this is something as a tightrope walk. On one side there should be development, there should be roads, there should be connectivity, there should be hospitals, there should be schools, okay, there should be employment opportunities. At the same time, all this development should have to by the own pace. Now these two are very contradictory to each other, and this is where Indian government's policies are. That is where you will see some development as well as some relative isolation approaches. Both would be there. You can write down few points, okay, few points to understand this one. Article 15 clause 4, okay, I'm giving you some articles in the constitution which would help you out. Article 15 clause 4, maybe I'll take a complete different slide, it would be helpful. Article okay, all constitutional provisions put at one place. Okay, I will not dictate, just take a screenshot. Okay, constitutional provisions for tribal integration. I'll just zoom this, take a screenshot. Maybe when you are reading polity, try to pay some more attention on this. Okay, I hope you are able to read this. So Article 15 clause 4, Article 19 clause 1e, Article 23, Article 29, 164, Article 30, 330, 332, Article 334, 335, 338a, 339, 1, 371, 5th schedule, 6th schedule. So in short, like from history perspective, there are various provisions in constitution for development and preserving tribal identity. One hand we have development, on the other hand you have to preserve the tribal identities. Both has to go hand in hand. Okay, from history perspective you need not write the article numbers, but from polity perspective this would be very important. So that's why I kept all these things. Again, this I copied from Lakshmikant only. So if you see Lakshmikant or any polity textbook, you'll see all the articles which are related to the tribal developments. So make a list. This would be helpful in multiple places, not only in your post-independent history. The same question can be asked in your polity paper or social justice paper, or it can come in your society paper. It can be asked in your you can say internal security paper, left-wing extremism, or even a complete full-fledged essay only on tribals. Okay, so if you get a question or essay on tribal integration, you should be in a position to write. So that's where I am preparing you so that you will be in a position to write. My target is all of you should be in a position to write 1250 words only on tribals. 1250 words. That's where I am taking some efforts here. Okay, this is my you can say this one, because as I told, this question I can ask the same question in your GS1 paper, GS2 paper, GS3 paper, or GS4 paper. If it is asked in GS1 paper, what is the syllabus of GS1? Can anyone quickly tell me?
History,
Okay.
India and
Okay.
world history, geography, Indian and world geography, society, um,
Uh, Hello. Am I audible? No. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. There was a issue in my power supply. Yeah.
sir.
Now I hope like you are able to see the screen as well, right? Or no? Not yet. Let me share it. Yeah. Yeah. Now.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Screen is there,
Thanks.
but nothing is.
Okay. So like GS1,
Yeah,
the
okay.
topics: geography, history, and society. GS1. Okay. So if the same question about tribals comes in GS1 paper, you have to write what is the geographical distribution of tribals in India. Okay, then which areas the tribals are focused more. Okay, what are the different tribal distribution groups in India, maybe from geography perspective or from your history perspective, the post independent tribal integration into India. Or if the same thing is asked in your society paper, okay, your approach has to be different. Okay, now if the same question about tribals come in GS2 paper, you have to write about constitutional provisions. Okay, you have constitution, then ministry which is there, which ministry is there regarding tribals. Can anyone tell me? Is there a ministry? Yeah, no, no, tribal affairs, Ministry of Tribal
Ministry
Affairs.
of Tribal
We have
Affairs.
MTA, Ministry
Tribal
of Tribal
welfare.
Affairs. You have to mention about the schemes run by Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Then what are the institutions which are there for tribals in India? Any other institutions? Government institutions? Very good. We have NCST.
National
National
Commission on
Anything
Commission
else?
for Scheduled Tribes.
Anything else we have? Any laws are there for tribals? Ye- TriFed, very good. TriFed for tribal
Panchayat,
Trifed.
it's
development.
Trifed for
Any laws are there for tribals in India? Yeah, very good. PISA, Panchayat
Panchayat
Extension to
Extension for
Scheduled
Union
Areas.
Scheduled
Status
Okay,
Areas.
Act.
1996, a very important act when you are reading about the tribals and tribal integration. Okay, go through PESA, Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas. Anything else? Any other laws are there? Okay, heard of Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act, 1989. Okay, we have POA 1989, SC and ST Prevention of Atrocities Act. I hope you are making a note of all this because you will not get at one place. Okay, all this information. So I suggest make a note of all this. So I hope like you should be in a position to write 1250 words only on these things. Okay, in addition to that, there are Forest Rights Act. Okay, that is FRA. We have Article 244 in the Constitution talking about scheduled areas and schedule 5 areas, schedule 6 areas. Okay, then we have MG specifically for tribal areas. We have LARR, Land Acquisition Rehabilitation Resettlement Act 2013. Okay, so if the same question is coming in your GS2 paper, your approach has to be completely different. You are writing more about constitutional provisions, laws, ministries, or institutions, or Supreme Court judgments which are there for tribals. So I hope you should be very cautious in which paper you are writing and what you are writing. The same question if it is asked in GS3 paper. What is the syllabus in GS3? Economy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Economy,
One more
science and
topic.
technology,
Internal security.
environment,
So
biodiversity.
if the same issue has come in your internal security paper, your approach has to be different. If it comes in your disaster management paper, the one I quoted the example, how the tribals are, the primitive groups are fighting against the natural disasters. We can learn the lessons from them. Now, a smart student would understand where to write what. Okay, if the same question comes in your GS4 paper, how the cultures are being affected, should they be forcibly integrated into this one? Maybe they can give case studies. Your administrator, okay, which calls for setting up of a huge project, but this project calls for the forests getting destructed. Would you give permission or would you not give permission? Because these are all real life scenarios. Okay, for example, you are a IPS officer. Okay, you are posted in a Naxal affected region. Okay, in that case, so there are some small children who come under the way and you know that they belong to the Naxal groups. Would you shoot them or would you not shoot them? You have all the orders to shoot those people who are Naxals. You have to shoot them. Now, which way would you go? These are all ethical questions. Okay, now you might get the same thing in your essay. If it comes in essay, your answers have to be more general. Okay, your answers have to be more general. You need not write provisions, exact acts. Okay, but if it comes in your this paper, your approach is different. Comes in this paper, your approach is different. I hope like you got how to write what in which paper. Now, when you're preparing for topics like this, like tribals, try to be in a position to write 1250 words only on tribals. Okay, from all perspectives. From you should be having a 360-degree view when you're writing your answers. So from all perspectives, all possible perspectives, from geography to ethics, you are able to mention about tribals. So you can take this as a work, like whenever you're talking about tribal integration. Okay, try to focus on this one. Now, what exactly happened post-independence? What went wrong? That is what we have to discuss in detail. Okay, what went wrong? Why there are the Naxal problems in India? Now, you can write down few points. After independence, despite various constitutional provisions and statutory provisions, the implementation was far from satisfactory. The implementation of, see, we were discussing that even this page is not enough. Okay, these many provisions are there for tribals in our constitution. I'm talking only about constitution. I'm not talking about anything related to laws. I'm not talking anything related to the state government laws. I'm not talking anything about the other institutions, the role of president, the role of governor, the role of tribal advisory committees. Okay, so there are multiple other institutions at bay or in working. Now, despite various provisions in the constitution, despite various laws, despite various institutions, despite various schemes run by the governments, now the development or the whatever the policies the government is making whatever it is happening at the ground level, there is a lot of difference. Okay, there is a lot of, you can say, difference. A complete, a surprising picture would be shown at the ground level. Now what is being debated in Delhi, in the power corridors of Delhi, and what is actually being happening in the, you can say, the rural tribal areas of Chhattisgarh or Jharkhand are completely different. And because of this disconnect, there started another challenges in India. You can write down, despite various constitutional provisions, their implementation was far from satisfactory. Okay, you can write down some challenges. Some challenges the tribals faced. Some challenges the tribals faced or continue to face. Some challenges the tribals faced. Okay, in brackets, or continue to face, or continue to face, are below. Are below. Are below. Now, when you are preparing for this, you have to be very logical. Okay, write down or take a screenshot of this, or later you can write it down. Okay, all these causes, maybe in your notes I will list out all this and give it to you. Okay, we'll discuss some of this. First one is land related. Okay, I try to divide all the causes under these things. We will have a discussion upon each of this. First one is land related. Second one, governance related. Third one is displacement. Third one is displacement. Fourth one is livelihood related. Okay, these all scenarios led to the rise of left-wing extremism in India, or this left-wing extremism is what we call as Naxal movement or Maoist movements. Maoist movements. Now, what happened after independence? As I told, there are various constitutional mechanisms which were there, but their implementation was far from satisfactory. Now, that means over time there emerged a nexus of politicians, bureaucrats, and corporates. Now, all the three, they came together in exploiting the tribals. And what happened exactly after independence was, now India started huge multi-purpose projects, like the companies like SAIL, GAIL, BAIL. Okay, all these companies, government public sector undertakings. Okay, now SAIL, GAIL, BAIL, NTPC, all these projects were started in tribal regions, and because of this they required huge amounts of land, and these tribals were evacuated because they did not have that capability to resist this one. And also many mining projects were also started. Because those areas, if you see the geographical distribution of minerals in India, it is mostly concentrated in this region, in the central part of India, like Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Bihar. Now these are the regions where majority of the mining resources in India are concentrated. Now, because of the huge power projects or mining projects or dam, irrigation projects, almost all the projects were started in those places where tribals were most. And this led to forcible evacuation of tribals, destruction of their natural habitats, and loss of livelihood without any rehabilitation. That means what the tribals experienced before independence, the same thing was happening after independence also. That is what they waited for 15 years, but nothing happened. That means after independence, we see that till 1950s went to 1965. Okay, in fact, the same way the British exploited them, similar format we also started exploiting them. But at the same time, in constitution or laws, they talk about something, but what is happening at the ground level is something different. And this led to land related. The land ceiling acts were often violated. The existence of special land tenures, that is land ceiling, was there. Encroachment and occupation by government. Okay, even the government itself. Okay, occupation of government and community lands. Government itself sometimes, or through private agencies, they were, the water bodies were taken over by powerful sections of society. Then lack of titles, because these tribals might not have all the papers. Okay, land related papers, documents. They do not have Aadhaar card, they do not have voter ID card. Okay, so even if there is there, they do not have proper education. Okay, because your name is not written like this, your name is written as Kumar. Okay, if your name is Kumar, there is an extra R in your Aadhaar card. You are not this Kumar, you cannot come here. Okay, because their names are also not, if they are spelled in English or Hindi, there is bound to be some disparities. Okay, and most of them do not have proper documentation, and they were not able to show that this land belongs to me. Okay, because in the tribal customs, the land distribution, they did not have these concepts. So if this land belongs to everyone, forest belongs to everyone, water body belongs to everyone, this is where the tribal customs are there. But when we talk about the so-called civilized society, we say that this land is yours, this land is yours. Okay, or this water body is yours, and because of this documentation was not there, or they do not have valid and proper documentations, because their education levels are different, they were forcefully evacuated. Now, land related factors, and government also was turning a blind eye. Poor implementation of laws. We were having fifth schedules. I hope you know what is fifth schedule. Can anyone tell me quickly what is fifth schedule of Indian Constitution? What is 244, article 244, fifth schedule? Okay, if you do not know, go through. Mhm, mhm,
related
mhm.
related to scheduled tribes
Okay,
Administration of
that is
scheduled
something sixth
areas.
schedule. Okay,
other than AMTM, I
Assam,
think.
Meghalaya, Tripura. That's, yeah, that is sixth schedule. But can anyone tell me what is?
Oh,
Okay, okay,
yeah, that's
okay.
what I
So
said.
like we have two
Scheduled
types of
areas other
schedules. One
than
is fifth schedule,
AMTM.
which is for central India, and one is sixth schedule for northeastern India. Yeah, good. So what exactly is there in fifth schedule? What does it talk about? Anyone? Very good, very good.
Governor
That
is
is,
given
the governors are
responsibility for the development of
governors
scheduled
in fifth
areas.
schedule areas are having more powers than the governors elsewhere. For example, if you take governor of, maybe governor of Maharashtra and a governor of Chhattisgarh. Okay, both in principle, both are governors, but governors of Chhattisgarh have more powers, and governors of maybe Assam would be having even more powers. Okay, governors of Assam or Tripura would be having even more powers than the governors of Chhattisgarh. Okay, in short, the administration, there is, in short, fifth schedule and sixth schedule talk about autonomy. As I told, that the policy of the constitution makers or Jawaharlal Nehru initial policies was some autonomy was given, let them choose their development. That means let them not be forced upon, let them not forcibly assimilated into the cultures. This autonomy, whatever they are talking about, is already there in fifth schedule or sixth schedule in this one. But this fifth schedule and sixth schedule did not come into constitution later. This is there in constitution from 1950s. But from 1950s to 1960s, nowhere this was implemented properly. In fact, fifth schedule and sixth schedule, they talk about this one. In fact, many governors did not even submit the reports. Okay, because the governors are being somewhere else. Okay, in Raj Bhavan, they are more involved in local politics. Okay, who should become chief minister, who should become the ministers. In fact, governors do not have any other role. In fact, their role is much more concerned about the tribal areas, the development. But governors, the role of position of governors is very controversial post in India. Okay, so the governors are more busy in the mainstream politics. Okay, and they were often ignored. And also the administration, we will see this one, administration. So all these are land related. and in addition to land related, governance related. So those officials who were posted there, they were corrupt, they were incompetent, they were ill-trained or poorly motivated. Because I hope not many of you would feel, sorry, not many of you would feel Jharkhand as your first preference when you are filling your form. You will not feel Nagaland as your first preference. You will not feel Chhattisgarh as your first preference. Why is it like that? Not toppers would not choose these places because they are very turbulent. Everyone wants Karnataka, everyone wants Rajasthan, everyone wants Delhi. Okay, now why is it like that? Because we see that there are security challenges, there are developmental challenges, there are infrastructural challenges. Now all these are challenges the government is not using to motivate people to go there. In fact, government uses these places as punishment posting. Okay, you would have seen that. Okay, whenever you do not listen to your political bosses, you would be thrown into Naxal affected areas. Government is using these areas as punishment posting instead of developing the situations in those places, instead of motivating the people to go there. Okay, how can you motivate? You can say that if you work in maybe a city, after 5 years you'll get promotion. But if you work in this particular area, within 2 years you'll get promotion. Maybe this can be a motivation. Or they can say that you'll get more money, okay, compared to your peers if you live there, or if you get better facilities. Or maybe they can say that you can be there for 2 years, there will be some kind of job rotation. But those people who went there till their retirement, they have to stay in these areas. Now these kind of things do not motivate people to go there. And even those people who go there, they are poorly motivated, they are ill trained, not very much trained to deal with the problems of Naxalism, problems of tribals, their sensitivities, or completely incompetent. And this led to misuse of powers by police and violation of the norms of laws. Okay, now all this would lead to, you can say, the exploitation of the tribals, and mostly it is by the government officials. Sometimes helped by the government officials, sometimes the government officials were turning a blind eye to the exploitation of the people. Now in fact, if there is a corporate, if it wants to set up a factory in a tribal area, now many times these corporates would not go with the normal provisions. They try to help take the support of the government officials, forcefully take the signatures of the tribals and helping the corporates. It is through government officials. If not, if the corporates are directly signing, then the government is at least turning a blind eye. So the same goes true with central government or state government as well as the local government. Now because of all these governance related factors, they started hating the government officials itself. So one target for the uh, tribals or the left-wing extremism is the government itself, because it is the same government which started exploiting them. That is why whenever they see government official, they turn hostile. Whenever they see the government symbol, they turn hostile. Now what are the symbols of government? They became hostile or suspicious because of all these reasons. So in fact, many places in Chhattisgarh or Jharkhand, they say that the government officials are not allowed. The government officials are not allowed to enter into these places. Whenever they see ambassador cars with lal batti, okay, they throw stones at least. Okay, they ensure that they throw stones because they hate the government, because they felt that government means that is something which is helping the corporates in exploiting them. I hope you got the reasons. And the people who went there are also corrupt or incompetent, ill-trained or poorly motivated, and the subsequent governments are not taking steps to improve these conditions. Rather, they are using this as a punishment posting. I hope you got the problems. Maybe these are all common problems which are there, but they are more rampant in these regions. Okay, any questions till now? And also there were displacements and forced evacuations. Now, as I told, the displacement, so there was a statistic. What is the total scheduled tribe population in India? Anyone? How much population in India is scheduled tribes? Okay, 1 million. Okay, total percentage of population. What is the total SC population in
Nearly
India?
1 million.
Yeah, it is about 8%, 7 to 8%, whereas scheduled tribe, scheduled caste, it is about 17%.
18.
Okay, it is about 17%, and whereas scheduled tribes, it is about 8%. So in total, we are having a population of 25%, 17% scheduled caste, and 8% scheduled tribe. Now, in fact, if it is proportional, this one has to be 8%. Now, as per the government statistic itself, as per the Ministry of Tribal Affairs itself, the total displacements of tribals is 40%. That means if you make a map of due to the projects, maybe as I told, like large projects are started, like steel plant or power plant or irrigation projects or agricultural projects or dams, whenever they are constructing, 40% of those people who are displaced are tribals. I hope you got the reason here. That means if it is actually equitable,
ಪಲ್ಲವಿ
ಹಾಂ
ಭಾರ್ಗವಿ ಸೊಪ್ಪು
ಭಾರ್ಗವ ಐತೆ ಏನು Bye.